Why did Wagner mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin mail a sledgehammer to the EU? Who's the real intended audience for it? And what is the subtext behind it all? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is Thanksgiving, 11/24/2022. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first and foremost, I always give you guys the map update. The answer is the map appears unchanged. There hasn't actually been any ground assaults by Russian armed forces that have been publicly reported. But let's talk about the real story. And that, we're going to go over to ground news. Prigozhin, and for those of you that don't know, Prigozhin is the head of an independent militia in the Ukraine conflict fighting on behalf of Russia called the Wagner Group. They famously recruit, initially they recruited former Russian soldiers, special forces types, and highly trained paratroopers, but they've sort of run through all the good troops, and now they've resorted to recruiting prisoners and motorcycle gang members, and they're sort of almost mafia-like in their behavior. But Prigozhin has sent this group's head, Prigozhin, has sent a bloody sledgehammer to the European Parliament. The blood is fake, of course. It's entirely a spectacle. But let's take a little bit of a closer look at what exactly he sent. You can see in some of the pictures here that, let's see if we can pay a bigger one. There we go. This is the head of the sledgehammer. It's clearly decorative. It features the Wagner mercenary crest, a pile of skulls, and I'm not sure what this translates as. But they also, let's see if we can find another picture here. Let's see. Sometimes you can find the other pictures depicting the handle, which I think is also pretty relevant for our conversation. The handle, there it is. You can see here that the handle has blood stains on its paint. But what does this mean, and why was it sent to the European Parliament? Well, the immediate context is, of course, this. A video that emerged, this was about 2 weeks ago, showing a sledgehammer execution of a Russian mercenary. And purportedly, the individual was a traitor who left the Wagner Group and went over to the Ukrainian side. It's, again, not clear if this is true, since, obviously the Wagner Group is not holding military tribunals. They aren't purporting any justice system. So he could have deserted. He could have been captured and then returned. He could have been captured and escaped. But the video was originally posted on Telegram, and let's see, I can't show you obviously the video, but we can show some stills. This is the individual that it purportedly happened to, and you can always count on the New York Post to really trash it up. But you can see this dude doesn't look like an elite fighter. He looks like probably what he is, which is a former prisoner who was born in 1967. The heading said "The Hammer of Revenge," and so there's the immediate context, right? I'm not going to scroll down. They actually show some stills of the actual hammer swinging, which no one needs. But there's a little more context to this, right? And this is, of course, that the Prigozhin actually weighed in. He actually, you can see the heading of this here. Prigozhin weighed in and in support of this execution on Telegram. Prigozhin showed up in the comments of the video, classic, and made a thinly veiled threat to those who have opposed the Russian war at home or fled the draft. He says, quote, "Do not forget there are not only traitors who throw away their automatic guns and go over to the enemy. Some traitors are holed up in offices, not thinking about their own people. Some of them use their own business jets to fly to those countries that seem neutral to us so far. They fly away as to not participate in today's problems. They are traitors too." So there's a little additional context, right? Clearly, Prigozhin has leaked this video to communicate directly to the Russian people, and particularly the Russian ultra-nationalists, a subset of extremely pro-Russian people that are some of Vladimir Putin's chief supporters and the war's chief supporters. And the reason that he's cultivating them, that he's seeking out their attention, is, I believe, this is my thesis at this point, that he aspires to replace an ill Vladimir Putin, that Putin is very sick, becoming increasingly incapacitated, and maybe even unable to make good decisions about the war and its direction. And so Prigozhin aspires to, well, replace Putin. And he's doing that by literally carving out his base slowly and steadily. And you notice that he is doing so quite effectively, right? And he's positioning himself first as distinct from the other Russian oligarchs who have insulated themselves from the war in general, right, by living in third-party countries and avoiding sanctions. And he's also attempting to publicly show himself as a face of Russian strength. And this is the key to understanding this hammer stunt, is that it's not for the EU, who recently declared the Wagner Group, I believe they declared them a terror organization, or they may have simply declared Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, implying that the Wagner Group is the terror group. So it's not about sending a message to the EU. The message is for Russian ultranationalists, and that is that Prigozhin is not just, unlike the other oligarchs, staying in Russia and not avoiding the war. He is actively fighting against Russia's enemies, is the message he wants to portray. The Wagner Group, obviously recruited, funded by him, and actually equipped by him, and fighting out near the Bakhmut region of the conflict, where they actually haven't enjoyed much battlefield success. But he also, of course, recently has publicly acknowledged that he is the head of the Wagner Group, something that he denied for years, though it was fairly obvious that he was the head. But he also acknowledged publicly for the first time that he was responsible for the Internet Research Agency, the Russian disinformation and misinformation group that heavily attempted to influence the U.S. elections. And so what you see more and more, he is trying to position himself as the force that is not just supporting Russia, but is actively driving the war forward. And he has concurrently been more and more vocal about his displeasure with the Russian Ministry of Defense, who he feels is corrupt and ineffective at prosecuting the war. And so, again, all this is part of a general effort to take the Russian ultranationalists away from Putin, I believe, so that when Putin expires, Prigozhin is naturally positioned to secede and accede his power base. Of course, Putin still publicly is very much a supporter of the Ministry of Defense, but is in this uncomfortable space where Telegram is one of the biggest sources of information, and Prigozhin can go direct to the people via Telegram in a way that, say, the Russian Ministry of Defense or even Putin himself cannot communicate. So anyway, guys, I hope that gives you some context into this hammer stunt and who it's really intended for. Of course, if you want to see the combat video breakdowns that YouTube would never let me show you, you want to do that on the Patreon. Thanks so much to my Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys are the ones who make this whole thing possible. To my US viewers, have a good Thanksgiving, and I'll see you all in the next one.